Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument in Wiltshire, one of the most recognizable monoliths of the late Neolithic period, built some 5,000 years ago.
For centuries, Stonehenge has stood in silence, a perfect circle of towering stones, weathered by time, studied by experts, and surrounded by questions no one could fully answer. But what if everything we thought we knew about it is wrong? Because just recently, scientists deployed advanced AI-powered 3D scanning technology beneath the surface, not just around Stonehenge, but deep into the Earth itself. And what they uncovered is sending shockwaves through the archaeological world. Hidden just beneath the soil, a massive ring of enormous pits, each one wide enough to swallow a house, each one placed with precision that defies primitive explanation. A perfect circle stretching over a mile, built over 4,000 years ago, and somehow completely invisible until now. But here's where it gets disturbing. The deeper the scans went, the stranger it became. Patterns, structures, entire landscapes buried and forgotten, not just in England, but across the planet. Civilizations we never recorded. Engineering we can't explain. Designs that suggest something far more advanced or far more intentional than history is willing to admit. And now, one question refuses to go away. What were they really building? Before we expose what they found, hit like and subscribe, because some say even the truth about Stonehenge was never meant to be known, the giant pits nobody could explain. Right next to Stonehenge, there is a large Neolithic settlement called Durrington Walls. Archaeologists have known about it for years. People lived there, gathered there, held ceremonies there. Nothing unusual about that. But when scientists started scanning the ground around Durrington Walls more carefully, using ground-penetrating radar and soil surveys, they began picking up something buried beneath the fields that made absolutely no sense. 14 massive pits arranged in a ring so geometrically precise, it looked like something had drawn it with a compass. The first question was obvious. Could something natural have done this? They ruled out sinkholes, too organized, animal traps way too big, random chance far too deliberate. So they went to work. They drilled soil cores deep into the earth and analyzed what came back. Microscopic traces of ancient DNA, chemical analysis of the soil layers, and a technique called luminescence dating, which can tell you the exact last moment a grain of soil was exposed to sunlight. And every single test came back with the same conclusion. Humans made these pits around 2500 BCE on purpose. But here is the part that really gets you. These pits were not dug randomly over time. They were not the slow result of different people digging in different eras. They were planned, laid out, and executed as one single coordinated project. Which means that 4,000 years ago, before metal tools, before written language, before any mathematics we would recognize, a group of people looked at an open field and said, "We are going to carve a perfect circle into this ground. A circle more than a mile wide." And they did it. No GPS, no drones, no aerial view of any kind. Just ropes, wooden stakes, human memory, and a level of spatial thinking that honestly should not be possible for the era. Together, these pits make up what may be one of the largest prehistoric monuments ever built in Britain, larger in total area than Stonehenge itself. And for 4,000 years, it was completely invisible. Farmers plowed over it. Tourists drove past it. Generations lived and died on top of it without a single clue. As for why it was built, archaeologists believe the pit circle marked a sacred boundary, a line separating ordinary land from spiritually charged space. Some researchers think it represented the border between the world of the living and the underworld. Others think it was simply a boundary marker for the massive ceremonial landscape of which Stonehenge is only one part. What nobody disputes is this. The people who built it were not simple. They were not primitive. They thought in geometry, in scale, in long-term vision, and they pulled it off. The buried cities in the Amazon. Now, here is where the story gets global. Because the same pattern, massive ancient structures hiding in plain sight until modern technology finds them, keeps appearing all over the world. In the Amazon rainforest, researchers spent more than 20 years exploring on foot. 20 years of fieldwork in one of the most difficult environments on the planet. And what they found was significant, but incomplete. They knew people had lived there. They knew settlements existed. But the jungle hid the scale of it completely. Then they used LiDAR. LiDAR is a laser-based scanning technology that fires millions of pulses from an aircraft. Each pulse bounces back and reveals the shape of the ground beneath, even through dense jungle canopy, and it digitally strips the forest away and shows you what is underneath. They scanned over 100 square miles. What appeared on the screen stopped researchers cold. More than 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms shaped by human hands used as homes and public buildings. Agricultural terraces stepped into hillsides with engineering precision. Drainage systems, carefully shaped farmland, and roads, wide, straight roads cutting through the landscape in straight lines. But these roads did something that no natural path ever does. They did not follow rivers. They did not bend around hills. They crossed each other at perfect right angles, forming a complete grid system in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. At least 15 distinct settlements appeared, all linked by this road network built by people of the Kilimop and Upanu cultures. Living there from around 500 BCE to around 600 CE. They grew corn and sweet potatoes. They moved rivers. They reshaped the land on a massive scale. And they sustained a population that scientists previously thought was impossible for the Amazon. Not dozens of people, not hundreds, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands. For centuries, we assumed the Amazon was an untouched wilderness. It was not. It was a managed, engineered, densely populated civilization, and it was completely invisible until a laser found it. The Nazca lines the world did not know existed from the Amazon. We go west into the Peruvian desert, and we meet one of archaeology's most famous and most frustrating mysteries, the Nazca lines. If you have seen pictures, enormous figures etched into the desert floor. A hummingbird, a spider, a monkey. Geometric shapes stretching for miles. Figures so large they can only be seen from the air. For decades, archaeologists have been trying to figure out why the Nazca people made them, how they made them with no aircraft, and whether there were more we had not found. The answer to that last question is yes, hundreds more. Traditional fieldwork was too slow and too limited. People on foot mapping the desert by hand could spend years on a small area and still miss figures that were simply too faint for the human eye to catch. So researchers trained an artificial intelligence to look for patterns in aerial photographs and drone imagery. They fed the AI terabytes of images and taught it what a Nazca geoglyph looks like. The angles, the edges, the specific way the lines sit against the desert surface. Then they ran it. In 6 months, the AI identified 303 previously unknown geoglyphs. It nearly doubled the total number of known Nazca figures in less than half a year. Some of the new figures are tiny, just a few feet across, sitting right next to the famous giant ones. Entire categories of design that no human researcher had ever cataloged. Styles, motifs, and figures that had been lying in the open desert for centuries, missed by every human eye that ever looked. And with this expanded picture, scientists can now finally start testing what the lines were actually for. The evidence increasingly points away from decoration and towards something more practical and more spiritual at the same time. Walkways and ceremonial routes, paths used by communities moving across the landscape in ritual processions, not mysterious messages for aliens, sacred roads for human feet. 303 new figures, 6 months, 1 AI. The landscape around Stonehenge was already sacred back in Britain. The same technology was reshaping the story of Stonehenge itself. Because the stones did not rise from an empty landscape, not even close. Scientists working around Stonehenge have now found evidence of a sacred geography that existed centuries before anyone placed a single stone at Salisbury Plain. The site, called Robin Hood's Ball, dates to around 3600 BCE, roughly 500 years before Stonehenge. Archaeologists call it a causeway enclosure. Not a fortress, not a wall. A series of broken, interrupted ditches and banks forming a ring with deliberate gaps left between the segments. Those gaps were the point. This was not designed to keep people out. It was designed to bring people in. Researchers believe it was a gathering place for meetings, feasts, rituals, and the kind of community bonding that holds early societies together. Then, while workers were preparing land at Lark Hill, northeast of Stonehenge, for new military housing, archaeologists moved in first. They found another causeway enclosure buried under the hill, completely unknown, and as they dug deeper, the picture kept growing. Hundreds of flint tools, leaf-shaped arrowheads made with real craftsmanship, pieces of human skull, antler tools worked down to stumps by people who used them hard, and pottery. Multiple styles from multiple places, different communities, different traditions, all represented in the same site. This is significant because pottery styles in the ancient world worked like fingerprints. Every community made vessels in its own way. Finding multiple styles in one place means multiple groups of people were coming here, bringing their own identities and traditions with them. Stonehenge was not the beginning of something. It was the continuation of something. A landscape already deep with memory, already used for ceremony, already mapped by human meaning long before the famous stones were ever raised. Where the rocks came from and why it matters. Stonehenge is built from two types of stone. The big ones, the ones forming the iconic outer ring, are called sarsen. Each weighs around 25 tons, 3 African elephants. The heel stone alone weighs 30 tons. The smaller stones inside are called blue stones. Not actually blue. They get a bluish tinge when freshly broken and the name stuck. These came from the Prehistoric Hills in southwest Wales, 150 miles away. The largest of the blue stones is the altar stone, weighing around 6 tons. For nearly a century, scientists assumed it came from Wales, too. Same trip. Grab an extra stone. Makes sense. In 2018, that assumption was destroyed. Researchers used advanced geochemical analysis, reading the molecular fingerprint of the rock itself, and traced where the altar stone actually came from. Not Wales, Scotland. Specifically, the Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland, over 400 miles from Stonehenge. 400 miles, 6 tons of stone, no wheels. The wheel had been invented in Mesopotamia by this point, but had not yet reached Britain. No vehicles, no cranes across the full length of the island. How, we genuinely do not know. The ice road theory that glaciers or frozen winter pathways allowed the stones to be slid was debunked, and it was warmer during the Neolithic than it is today. The river theory that the stones were floated on rafts does not work for sarsen stones. They are too heavy to float, they sink. The honest answer is that nobody has fully cracked this ropes. Human muscle, possibly wooden rollers or sledges, and a collective determination that moved a 6-ton stone across an entire country. As for the large sarsen stones, the geochemical analysis eventually traced those too. Not from Marlborough Downs, as had long been assumed, but from West Woods, a forest about 19 miles away from Stonehenge. And excavations at a site in the Prehistoric Hills called Wan Mon found empty stone holes, evidence that stone pillars had been deliberately removed in prehistory. There was once a stone circle there, and the evidence strongly suggests that some of Stonehenge's blue stones were taken from that older dismantled circle and relocated to Salisbury Plain. Stonehenge was not just built from raw stone. Parts of it were built from the recycled bones of an older monument. How Stonehenge was actually built and who lived there. Stonehenge was not built in one go. It was built across roughly 1,000 years in stages by generation after generation of builders. Around 3,100 BCE, a circular ditch was dug. Wooden posts raised inside it. Cremation pits established. This is the oldest cremation cemetery ever found in Britain. Around 2,600 BCE, the blue stones arrived from Wales. Some researchers believe people thought these stones had healing powers, which would explain why anyone went to the trouble of moving them 150 miles. Around 2500 BCE, the Great Sarsen stones arrived. The outer ring, the trilithons. 2 enormous upright stones, each 25 tons, topped by a massive horizontal lintel. The shape that the whole world recognizes. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed something telling. The stonework is not evenly finished across the whole monument. The northeast side facing the midsummer sunrise and the inner faces of the central trilithons were the most carefully and finely dressed. The builders were not just placing rocks, they were sculpting a space with specific intention and specific direction. Building Stonehenge required roughly 20 million man-hours of labor. The average human lifetime is around 700,000 hours. One person working every hour of their entire life from birth to death would still need almost 29 generations of identical effort to complete the job. Accounting for the reality that people sleep, eat, and do other things, we are looking at around 57 generations of coordinated labor across more than 1,000 years. Those builders needed somewhere to live. Close to Stonehenge, archaeologists found one of the earliest known settlements in the area, a Mesolithic home dating back to around 4,300 BCE. Walls built around a large fallen tree trunk reinforced with flint. A cobblestone floor lining the pit left by the uprooted tree. A roof of animal hides. Heating was handled with real ingenuity. An indoor fire was too dangerous, but stones heated in an outdoor hearth could be brought inside where they radiated warmth safely through the night. And a heat storage system invented thousands of years before the radiator. At Durrington Walls, the village closer to Stonehenge, archaeologists found oval-shaped houses built on chalk foundations, white chalk walls that reflected firelight, wicker furniture, clay pots and jars, wooden beds centered around a hearth. Researchers recreated 4 of these houses using authentic materials: 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, 3 tons of straw. The houses are single-room structures about 16 feet on each side. They are brighter than you would expect, warmer than you would expect, and more carefully designed than you would expect. When someone baked the first loaf of bread in the recreation, and people tasted it, they were genuinely surprised. It was good. These were not primitive people scratching out survival. They were communities with craft, and comfort, and culture. And they built one of the most extraordinary monuments in human history. The real reason Stonehenge was built. This is the part everyone wants to know. The solar calendar theory has always been the most popular, and the evidence is real. Stonehenge is precisely aligned with the movements of the sun. During the summer solstice, the sun rises directly in line with the heel stone, sending light straight into the heart of the monument. During the winter solstice, the setting sun aligns with the altar stone at the center. For people with no clocks and no calendars, the solstices were everything. They told you when to plant, when to harvest, when the hardest months were coming, when the warmth would return. Stonehenge tracked time on a cosmic scale. Some archaeologists also believe it was a healing center. Bluestone fragments have been found deliberately chipped away, souvenirs taken by people who believed the stone itself could cure illness. Bone analysis shows visitors came from all across Britain, and some were clearly unwell when they arrived. But the theory that has emerged most recently, and which the altar stone's Scottish origin makes compelling, goes deeper than all of that. Around 2500 BCE, Britain was changing fast. A new group of people was arriving. Scholars call them the Beaker people, named after a specific pottery style they used to bury their dead. They came from the regions of the Netherlands and Germany, and over time, they brought about one of the most significant population replacements in British prehistory. The existing population had descendants of Neolithic farmers who had themselves arrived from the Middle East around 6,000 years earlier, found their world being fundamentally transformed. Researchers now believe that Stonehenge may have been a direct response to this pressure. The original inhabitants brought the altar stone all the way from Scotland, 400 miles specifically because Scottish communities use recumbent stones like this one in their own sacred circles. By placing a Scottish stone at the heart of Stonehenge, the builders may have been sending a message across the whole island, a statement of unity, a call to every community in Britain, north, south, east, west, that this place belonged to all of them. In a time of division and displacement, Stonehenge may have been the most powerful political act possible, a monument that said, "We are one people. We are not going anywhere. This land remembers us." The altar stone lit by the midwinter setting sun, placed at the exact center of the monument, aligned to the cosmos. It was not just an astronomical marker. It may have been a bridge between communities, between the living and the dead, between the present moment and the long memory of the land. Here is what every single one of these discoveries has in common. Every time new technology gets pointed at the ancient world, AI, LiDAR, luminescence dating, geochemical analysis, the same thing happens. We find out we were wrong about how small the ancient world was. The pit circle at Durrington Walls is bigger than Stonehenge. The Amazon cities housed hundreds of thousands of people. The Nazca lines had 303 more figures than we knew. The altar stone at Stonehenge came from 400 miles away. And the landscape around Stonehenge was already sacred for 500 years before the first stone was raised. Every time the technology gets better, the ancient world gets bigger. These people had no metal tools, no written language, no engines, no calculus. What they had was observation, patience, creativity, and something we often underestimate: shared meaning. A collective belief in something bigger than any one of them, strong enough to move mountains across an entire country and sustain a building project across 57 generations. The pits around Durrington Walls are still there right now, buried under the Wiltshire grass, just outside the fence line at Stonehenge. You could stand on them and not know, but now we know. And the more we find out, the clearer it becomes. These people were not so different from us. They worried, they celebrated, and they needed to belong. They wanted to be remembered.